International marketing and branding speaker and best-selling author David Aaker brings his high energy and content-rich signature presentations to audiences across the world. Known as the visibility coach, marketing speaker David shows business owners and entrepreneurs how to craft and promote a truly remarkable brand identity. He joins us today, and it's our pleasure to present Prasad Sangameshwaran, editor ETBrandEquity.com, in conversation with David Aaker, international motivational speaker.
Hello, everybody. This is the moment that all of us have been waiting for. A discussion with someone who's seen that, done that over the last several decades. He's been the authority of branding, and I should probably owe my job to him because he's the one who made brand equity a globally renowned term. And sir, welcome to this discussion. Here we have David A. Aaker, the authority on branding, someone who has the years of global CEOs and CMOs. Thank you for taking out the time to join us for this discussion. So to start off with, when the COVID crisis hit the world, what was the first thought that came to your mind on what would be the future of marketing?
Well, I don't know. It's sort of a gradual thing, but once I sort of figured out what was happening, I thought of several ways that that's going to affect branding. And at the top of the list was the whole concept of a higher purpose. And what I observed is that people now had extra time. And they started to think about really the important questions of life. What's the meaning of life? And what's the meaning of my job? Why do I come to work? Why is my company is in existence? Is it just to make money? Is it just to increase sales and profits? I want more than that. And there's also another thing that I think happened, and that is the inequality in the world became much more visible. I mean, everybody knew about it. Everybody was concerned about it, but now it became much worse and much more visible. The people in the world, some of them are struggling for food, for housing, and you see the impact of the absence of access to medical care, and the effects of global warming now is just more and more severe. And in hot places, people have to get inside where there's air conditioning, and cold places have to get inside where there's heat, and that makes the pandemic worse. And so I think that the trend that has been there for some decades toward firms having a higher purpose, to mean something more than making money, is really accelerated. And I think that there's no argument anymore as to whether an organization needs that. That argument is now over. And so you need a higher purpose. It can be an offering-driven higher purpose, like we make insanely great products, or we inspire children to be the builders of tomorrow, like Lego has. But it also, the value of a social higher purpose or an environmental higher purpose has become much greater. And you have things like Lifebuoy with Help a Child Reach 5, and Patagonia with their interest in creating clothing that conserves water and getting people to reuse clothing, to repair clothing, and to recycle clothing is more and more companies want to be like Lifebuoy and Patagonia.
Dave, you spoke about, now companies looking at measuring their investments in purpose. So will ROP be the parameter going forward, the return on purpose?
Yes and no. I think there needs to be much more effort on measurement, because in any organization, what you measure corresponds to what you do.
Right.
And so measurement is important, and also it's going to be really important to justify spending resources in this direction. And so, yeah, people are going to need to measure. But on the other hand, some of this is impossible to measure.
Right.
It gets back into how do you measure the ROI of a brand, and or hiring good people, or any other intangible. It becomes very difficult, and you run into the danger of overemphasizing short-term measures, especially short-term financials. And when you do that, you sort of destroy what you're trying to create. And so the answer is yes, you want to measure as much as you can. You want to drive that measurement toward ROI. You want to do things like, Lifebuoy created 3 videos that generated 44 million views around their Help a Child Reach 5 program. And you can translate that into dollars. How much would it cost in advertising to create that much energy and that much visibility? So that can be translated to an ROI type of measurement, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a limit as to how much you can quantify it. And you really have to do what you do with brands and say that conceptually, our strategy really demands this. And that's why we do it. And if we can see that if we remove this from the strategy will fail. And so there has to be a conceptual strategic logic to it as well.
True. Brings us to the next question is that, 30 years back or so, when you started, looking at this entire way marketing would move forward, would you have seen this coming? So basically, did the prophet see this coming?
The higher purpose, you mean?
The higher purpose, the evolution in marketing, the speed at which change has affected us, all these put together.
Yes, I think that all these trends that we're seeing in this coronavirus age are trends that have been existing for several decades. They just now are accelerating.
Right.
And instead of taking 2 more decades to reach their pinnacle, they're doing that in just a few years.
Right.
And so we're starting to see not only it happen faster, but we're sort of seeing that there's an endpoint that's more meaningful than we had thought.
Many a times we feel that middle management is really convinced that they need to take the right steps, take the long-term measures in terms of building the strong foundation for a brand. But they often say that it's the pressure from the board, which is why they have to look at these short-term steps. Q on Q, some say, has actually kind of come down to day on day now. Are these pressures, are boards realizing that they need to be more patient in times like these?
So even the investor community is more aware, and the percentage of investor decisions that are based on environmental or social higher purpose is much higher than it has been. It's grown extraordinarily well, and if the investors care, then the board will have a better incentive to care. And it's also the case that across the world, especially in Europe, there are government regulations that say that the board explicitly has to take into account other stakeholders than shareholders. So the boards in some areas, like in America for what we call Corporation B, which is a special kind of corporation that qualifies, and in the UK and elsewhere, the government has said you must take into account the other stakeholders.
As consumers stay locked up in homes for prolonged periods, which are the brands that are actually making the strong human connections during these challenging times? What are some interesting examples that you could cite?
The concept of brand community becomes even more important. A brand community is a group of people that share with each other and with a brand some common interest or activity or issue that they're passionate about. And when you can create a brand community, you can create an amazing level of loyalty, because there's so much involvement, there's so much shared values and so forth, that people get loyal, the brand becomes more credible, the brand becomes more a part of your life. In this age, when the need for social interaction has become so much more pronounced and so much obvious, the existence of brand community provides a great outlet. So you have the classic cases, Harley Davidson, that have a community of motorcycle riders that shared rides, that shared adventures, that shared, interest in how you fix a motorcycle. And we have Sephora, who has a community around beauty, not around cosmetics or skincare, around beauty. And you have Etsy, that has a community around making crafts and marketing crafts. Airbnb is really a community of people who want to adventure in their travel. And so I think that it's not easy to do. Not everybody can do it. Not everybody will have the right context. But if you do, that can be a wonderful sort of aid that's even more effective now because of this need for social interaction. And I might add, it is especially useful for B2B companies. A company like Salesforce.com, for example, has an interest community around applying their software. And it's really a powerful way to connect with customers and to provide an extremely high level of loyalty.
This is also an era where many say that the disruptors have been disrupted. Would you give them a second chance?
I think it's possible. First of all, they have to address the reason not to buy. And so they have to have a program that will make the experience as safe as possible. And Airbnb is doing that. Airbnb is a very well-run company. And they have created some procedures that make staying at their places as relatively safe when travel opens up. I think that they will be very healthy after this. The other thing is that organizations that are in most jeopardy are those that are affected by the virus and seeing their sales fall off, but also have a very unhealthy balance sheet. Too often companies were so eager to please shareholders, they bought back stock, and they didn't conserve their balance sheet. And there's other companies that were bought by financial people that did leveraged buyouts and saddled them with a lot of debt, knowing that if they went bankrupt, it wouldn't hurt them, and the government would probably bail them out. And so these companies that have a lot of debt are also affected. They're the most vulnerable.
Okay, and that would also probably mean that the vulnerable companies could include some of these promising startups that were following the cash burn philosophy, right?
Yes, except many of those companies were able to raise a lot of money in the good days.
Yeah.
And those that did will be in very good shape. And those that gambled and said, well, I don't want to raise money when things are good because that money is very expensive. If I can wait a little bit, I can raise money much cheaper. And those that took that route made a mistake.
Brings us to the next question is that, if you had to say pick 3 or 4 industries that are best positioned to take advantage of the post-COVID era, who would you put your money on?
Certainly the high-tech industry, who is supplying a lot of the infrastructure and the enabling people to keep managing their business in this environment. I think that they're in a very good position. And there's another group of organizations, like maybe some consulting companies like ours, Profit, who have been able to adapt to this new environment and have been able to function through all kinds of digitally enabled and internet enabled Zooming and remote meetings and so forth. They have a lot of cost, all this travel cost. They used to be traveling every day, that's gone. And so I think some of those will do well. And of course, anybody who's been able to adapt to e-commerce is doing well, or affected by e-commerce. And of course, it's not just Amazon, but a lot of other companies have been able to thrive in e-commerce besides Amazon. And they have advantages such as more of a simpler choice. You know, there's a company, the Dollar Shave Club, that gives you an option of 3 razors. Amazon gives you an option of 12,000. And second of all, they can have more of a personality. Amazon's very functional, but they can have a personality. They can have a passion for a product area. There's no passion at Amazon. They can have a personality. They can be humorous. They can be irreverent. They can be outrageous. Amazon can't do that. They can go into retail. Some of the strongest e-commerce companies have gone into retail with a huge advantage because they have a built-in customer base and built-in brand. So those are some of the people that are likely to be winners.
Since you spoke about Amazon, and this is something that we see in e-commerce companies in general, we are seeing that sales has taken probably the precedence over marketing. Does the Masiha of marketing, if I may call you so, see this as a permanent trend in the future, or you still feel that marketing has not lost its sheen yet?
I think that's true. It's like direct mail marketing. It's the sales, the immediate sales are so available. So it's tempting to drive everything with that, or to select programs that will drive immediate sales. However, if you look at the successful e-commerce companies and the successful companies that have been reached out to e-commerce, they almost always have a brand play. They almost always are doing things to create a strong brand. And so I mentioned like Dollar Shave Club. It's very representative, I think. They have created an extremely strong brand. Now, it's true they have functional benefits. You don't have to go into a store to buy a razor. It'll be sent to you in the mail. And furthermore, they're very cheap and they're very simple. That's functional benefits, but they have an amazing personality. And they achieved their initial success by a 3-minute video that went viral. In 2 days, they got 12,000 subscribers, and it was very humorous. It was very outrageous. It was very irreverent, and it created a personality and a brand they followed through on. When you get your razors in the mail, you get a little booklet that's full of really quirky, humorous, interesting little stories that you can read, and again, it's very much on brand. You have an e-commerce brand like Casper, the mattress company, and they're all about sleep. If you go to a mattress retailer, they're just interested in explaining to you how cheap their mattress is, but this e-commerce brand is about sleep, and it's a higher purpose, and that really differentiates them, provides them credibility, it provides them reassurance that this company knows what they're doing. So I think that the successful companies are more likely to be have something in their brand beyond functional benefits.
Also, we've seen a lot of probably job cuts or pay cuts all over the world. So to keep the morale high of the employees, what would the role of branding be?
You know, you have to, I always challenge companies to ask their employees, what does your firm stand for? And do you care? And if they can't answer those 2 questions, then there's a problem with culture, there's a problem with morale, there's a problem with communicating the brand. And if that's not resolved, then most business strategies will falter.
Okay, and if Steve Jobs were alive today, would he have been more empathetic in a post-COVID era towards his employees, or would he have been equally demanding?
Oh, that's a really good question. Steve Jobs has some wonderful qualities that made him successful, but empathy was not one of them. But he was very good on detail. He really, and he was very focused. He was very strategic. He had a vision, and he stuck to that vision. And he was had a higher purpose. He wanted to create insanely great products, and that drove his success. And I think that coronavirus would be a challenge for people like Steve. And he probably wouldn't be the best CEO for Apple in this context. I think that Tim Cook is probably better suited in this context.
Are we going to see the rise of more empathetic brands as we move ahead? And are we going to see, a lot of these fun brands? I don't want to take names for obvious reasons, but are we going to see fun brands try to cut down on their fun element and look at being a little more serious, at least in the short to mid-term? Because consumers have gone through a lot.
They have to be sensitive, but I don't think they have to lose their sense of humor. But maybe they have to adapt a bit. The concept of trust and authenticity and substance has always been important, but it's even more important now. I think that you have to be extra careful that you don't come off as being phony. You don't come off as selling. Don't come off as focusing only on yourself and your sales, but that you're talking to the customer and you're concerned with what they are interested in. So two things I think that implies. One is you need to have substance behind what you say. Again, it comes back, we have, brand say versus brand do. Well, we want to have brands that actually do something, that have substance, have programs. The second of all is that it brings to mind one of my favorite topics, which is the use of stories in communication. And it's very important that organizations consider communicating using stories, because stories get attention, stories get remembered, stories are not counter-argued. They're not skeptical about stories, they're just locked in. So if you tell a story about Aaker, the appliance manufacturer, now the #1 in the world, who in the late 80s was a failing small Chinese company, and the new CEO came in and was confronted by a customer with a defective appliance and said, "Let's go to the warehouse, we'll find you a new one." And 70% of the appliances in the warehouse were defective, and he took them on the floor and had his employees destroy them with a sledgehammer. Well, that story, 35 years later, still sort of supports one of the key values of Aaker.
And finally, if you had to leave marketers with one thought that they should follow in their everyday lives, it should be in the soft board right in front of them. What would that thought be?
Well, I think the things we've been talking about, I think #1 is the higher purpose, to get a purpose and a social program, an environmental program that will not only be effective at addressing issues of society, but also will drive their business. And that's so important, because at the end of the day, the world needs this effort, and it will get more of it if it can support business as well. And then I think the whole idea of being sensitive to what's going on, and to make sure you're not phony, that you're not selling, that you have substance in what you're doing. I think that would be a second thing.
That's it, sir. Thank you so much for your time. It was an amazing discussion.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you keep visiting our resource center for downloading various informative and incredibly valuable assets, and also visit our help center in the lobby for any queries that you may have. Do keep an eye on the leaderboard, of course, to discover and monitor your overall score.